Well, Daniel Des Roches is a professor at the National Defense University. He joins us from Solomons in Maryland. And apologies, David Des Roches, thanks very much for joining us this evening. If we look at the Israeli target in terms of being wanted, being on a U.S. most wanted list for that 1983 incident, would this strike have suited the U.S. potentially? Or would Israel have had the support of the U.S.?
I don't think that the... No, sorry. I'm sorry, I lost a little bit of sound. I'm going to answer the question that I think you're asking. Sorry. So it's not a bounty. It's not wanted dead or alive. It's for information that leads to his prosecution and conviction. So I don't think that what the U.S. wanted to do with Fouad Shukr was necessarily germane to any Israeli calculus. He was only added to the Rewards for Justice program in 2015, so it took us a while to figure out his role in the Beirut bombings. I think that Israel's calculus is determined by the nature of the attack in Majd al-Shams and by his role as one of the lead developers of Hezbollah's missile inventory. So I think that's what's doing it. That's the driving focus here.
David, we are ultimately seeing escalating tensions. And Lebanon plans to file a complaint with the United Nations. Would a UN response have any impact on what's happening at this point?
Hard to see. I mean, the UN, there's few places where the UN is more discredited than in Lebanon. I mean, you know, the attack in Majd al-Shams was launched from south of the Litani River. There is a UN resolution that Hezbollah is supposed to be north of the Litani River. There's a UN force in South Lebanon that doesn't serve much useful purposes. Nobody's really happy with it. And indeed, Hezbollah killed a member of the UN force last year, so without any consequence. So I think it's unlikely to have any on-the-ground effect. It will, of course, be used for propaganda purposes by Hezbollah and by other adversaries of Israel.
There are a number of factors that could continue to escalate the situation, expand the conflict, especially regionally. What are you particularly concerned by?
Well, I'm concerned that there may be a sort of competitiveness within the axis of resistance. Iran's group of proxy networks in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. And, you know, it's less likely now that there'll be a Trump presidency than it was, say, a week ago, but it's still a strong possibility. And I think that with the arrival of Trump comes the return of maximum pressure, comes turning off the taps that Iran has to dispense to its proxy groups. And I fear that what you may see is that these groups will be rushing to show their relevancy, basically to stake a claim on a shrinking pool of resources. So I think we may see, just in terms of inter-alliance politics, attacks that probably don't serve anybody's interest, but are just there to elevate one proxy group versus another.
Now, until now, the U.S. has said that it's pursuing diplomatic avenues to try and de-escalate the situation. It would appear it's trying to avoid things getting worse. Would that be a fair assessment? And what would a diplomatic route, what would that look like by the U.S.?
Well, it's a good question. I think that when you look at Israel's response to the Majd al-Shams attack, they had to do something that was pretty visible and that hit Hezbollah pretty hard, rather than some of the scenarios that had been discussed, general attacks across Lebanon and in the Bekaa Valley. What you saw was basically a targeted attack against one person. So I think, although there's a substantial amount of damage incidental to that and loss of life, I think that the American diplomatic corps would probably look at that as a limitation that Israel pursued due to American urging. I'm not sure if that's going to make Hezbollah happy, but I think it is well within the sort of rules of the road that have been established for Hezbollah-Israel attacks and counterattacks.
All right, David Des Roches, thanks very much for joining us this evening and for your insights. David Des Roches is a professor at the National Defense University, and he was speaking to us from Solomon Island in Maryland.
Thank you.